Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at The Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network.
And I'm Pete Wright, and it's time for another classic Coulson rug pull.
Today we are talking about minute 87, which begins with a somewhat peaceful New Jersey field and ends with Iron Man spinning the turbine. Back on the show, we have playwright Dean O'Carroll. Hello, Dean.
Hey, happy to be back for more merriment.
More merriment, absolutely. We start, very brief thing here at the start of this with the fields of New Jersey as Thor kind of settles, and that's pretty much it for him. And then we jump back inside the helicarrier as we see Loki's reaction to all of this. What do you think of Tom Hiddleston as Loki? Do you like him in this role?
Oh, phenomenal! Yeah, no, he's one of the absolute best. A big Coulson fan and a big Loki fan. I love the character in all his sort of stages as he sort of grows and learns, and you see the potential for all of it. And I love that we still get more Loki even after he died for the third time in Endgame, but he still managed to be back. But we get this reset of Loki starting from the end of the first Avengers to begin his journey. And what Coulson says to him is paralleled by something that Owen Wilson says to him in the Loki show. Coulson says, "Losing is in your nature." And I don't remember the exact line that Mobius says, but it's something along the lines of, your goal is to sort of, be an obstacle that people have to overcome in order to find out more about themselves, to sort of, find their own true nature. It's like, wow, yeah, that is Loki's role in these movies. And, that's exactly what he is. Only in the first four does he really even get to be the main villain. Even in this, even though you don't learn it till the end, he's working for somebody. As cool as he is, he's a stooge, which is something that makes it a little more sympathetic. And Hiddleston just pulls it off with such panache. My kid's always watching all these Simpsons shorts. There's at least 2 or 3 of them now that include him as Loki, messing around with the Simpsons in one way or another.
That's funny.
And it's like I think he really likes any opportunity to play this character.
Well, he's just really good at it. And then once they figured out how to use him, right? He's kind of indispensable as a utility player, right? He can cross over so many different Avengers storylines in so many different places now that we've introduced variants and backdoors and all of the wonderful things that he's capable of. I just think he's an incredibly useful character, and Hiddleston is so likable. It's hard to imagine the time when he's going to retire the character.
Yeah. And I will love it when, whenever it happens, if it's in, Kang Dynasty or Secret War, when finally, the rest of the Avengers, whoever they are, meet the resurrected yet again Loki, and how much of the what's Thor's reaction going to be? What's everybody else who knew him from way back when? What's their reaction going to be? Because Thor and Hulk were on pretty good terms with him by the end of things. So
Sure.
maybe they'll be like, "Oh, hey, good, I'm glad you're alive." Like, "Oh, but wait, you're not actually that one. You're the one who we just who almost just murdered us all."
Right. And as we've talked about in the show, Natasha mentions, well, he killed 80 people earlier, and then he almost killed this old German man to make a statement. So he's kind of a villain. He really is. So it's funny that we all love him so much. But I guess this is the magic of the way that storytellers craft characters, where it's like, yeah, but he's so likable, and this actor plays him so well. It's easy to forget those parts. Well, this is this conversation where Coulson, as you brought up, does have this essentially this final opportunity to poke at Loki and really kind of push at him in a way where, kind of push some buttons of his. And we don't often see Loki's buttons getting pushed so much. And it's interesting because, Coulson's the comments that he has, you're going to lose, it's in your nature. It doesn't seem to bother Loki at all. And in fact, Loki retorts to him, your heroes are scattered, your floating fortress falls from the sky. Where is my disadvantage? It's not until Coulson says you lack conviction that it seems to kind of hit Loki in a way that it actually did kind of affect him. Do you think that works for this conversation here and the way that Coulson's approaching it?
It's fascinating, and I turn it over in my head like, is that true? Does he lack conviction? I mean, because it's a guy who has like he's like a pre-written speech about what he wants to do and why he wants to do it. He's very quite clear about what his goals are and what he sees as his plan for humanity and for the planet Earth. But Coulson sees through that. It's he says those things as much to convince himself as to actually present it. That it's not exactly that he thinks he deserves to be a king. It's that he wants to prove to himself that he deserves to be a king. To justify his own talk. I used to work at when I did stand-up comedy, sometimes I would perform at a club in the Boston area. It was in Cambridge. It was in Harvard Square, and the host loved to tell a story about a guy who was doing very hacky material, and it wasn't going very well. And the one of the audience was just giving him not exactly dirty looks, just sort of upset face. He said, "Hey, what's up with you, lady? What's wrong with you?" And she said, "Well, I feel you could struggle for more. I feel you could strive for more." And it's that's a Harvard Square heckle. That's we're just disappointed in you. So it's amazing. And it's that kind of killing, like that. Getting someone with something like that is such a great moment.
Oh God, it's like my mother was there.
Yeah,
crazy.
Oh, too funny. I find it to be such an interesting thing to hit. Because, I asked myself the same question is like, does he lack conviction? Like, it's an interesting thing to say. Obviously, it kind of hits Loki in a way that is a bit of a surprise. But it does make me wonder if there is this element of, not that Coulson necessarily even knows any of this, but the fact that Loki isn't even here on his own to do this, but basically had to get help from, as it turns out, Thanos and the other, and is using their tools to do all of this stuff. It does make me wonder if there's an aspect of him, just like he always feels with Thor, that he's always seen as kind of the second brother. He's never seen as prominent or important a brother as Thor. And here it's like, I don't even get to be the real villain of the film. I have to be the kind of the sub-villain because there's this bigger villain that I have to work for to make all this happen. And it does make me wonder if that's the angle that when Loki hears this, it hits him.
Yeah, I think that's just such a lovely, a lovely continuation of that line, that family line that we actually get to watch that dynamic played out all the time, whether they're on screen fighting with one another or not. Like, it's just something they never stop dealing with. And I think that's important for just general development.
And that Thor does love Loki and does cherish him and values him, yes, as my brother and the one who's not going to get to be king. But and part of that is Thor being arrogant, and that's all of it that Loki sees. But part of it is also that I've grown up with you and you've meant so much to me. And we get there was that very fun what if episode of what if Thor was an only child, and you see that only child Thor is this spoiled brat with no sense of responsibility, and you're like, oh yeah, because Thor knows how important Loki is to him. That's not enough for Loki, and Loki can only see that as Thor being selfish and arrogant when it's actually kind of the opposite of that. It's actually like, I am who I am partly because of you, and that's why I value you. It's a good dynamic that I think that they play out very well.
Yeah, for sure. Does Coulson, is he doing this purposefully because he's trying to distract him long enough to get the gun ready, you think?
Sure. And also because it's something that he thinks ought to be said.
Sure. it was one of those things where I'm like, it's like he's giving himself enough time to maybe get his finger on the trigger, you know?
Yeah.
Right, which is probably fine, but also he gets a moment. And this is like, this is some of that Tig Notaro dialogue, and the fact that it's the rug pull too. Like, that's part of the dialogue, is the joke that he doesn't even get to finish the sentence because he's been shot. And I love it. Like, I just, it breaks me a little bit because it's such a good emotional hit for me that I just like, why does he have that such an innate sense of playing the joke and playing the timing? Like, it just works perfectly.
It's interesting because, in the other times when Tig has done things like this with characters, getting this kind of a death, mostly to motivate other characters, but also, sometimes with a moment of coolness to it. There were his own creations that, this time he's playing with somebody else's toys, and breaking them. But it works well, fits the mold. I mean, maybe because we're all playing with archetypes and tropes and so on, which is fine. That's exactly what this sort of movie should be full of. But it is interesting that, he doesn't, have to have been, something that he had planned all along to be like this. He could also just sort of like, and here's what I'll do with this action figure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. So this gun is called the Destroyer Armor Prototype Gun. Not a very exciting name, but the nickname is more familiar to people probably who watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is the Bambino, which certainly is used a number of times over the course of that show. And according to the Marvel Wiki, this was actually made out of the Destroyer's body and then designed by a group of S.H.I.E.L.D. scientists. My only question is if they used Destroyer parts and technologies to make it, when it blasts, why is the blast not more Destroyer-like, which had a very specific blast? And I really loved the way that the Destroyer would shoot those blasts of fire out of its face. It was very exciting. But it's still cool.
It's actually taken from the exhaust of the Destroyer. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. right.
This is the back end.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Okay, so then as far as this goes, we see this hit, which is a hell of a hit. I mean, this blast that Coulson hits Loki with sends him through the wall, and I mean, it's like a scorching fireball, and it really kind of seems to hit Loki. He's down, he's not out. We will see more of Loki later, but this is, that was a great blast. It was impressive to see, and in the scope of things, it is one of those things where you would imagine that it does quite a bit of damage, but again, he's hitting an Asgardian. But it does let us have one last comedy beat from Coulson right here.
Yeah. That's really it. Timed perfectly.
So that's what it does. We cut from this. Now we jump back into the bridge. Now I have a question for you. All of this time, the helicarrier has been dropping. It's been listing through the sky as we have 2 engines down now. The only place, though, that we ever see people reacting to the fact that the whole ship is kind of plummeting down and listing and tipping back and forth is the bridge. Does it ever strike you as you're watching any of these scenes of Barton and Natasha fighting, or of everything going on here, that none of these people are reacting to the fact that this ship is listing side to side and falling from the sky?
Well, there's a generalized sense of panic, I'd say, right? I mean, there's
not in the bridge, but when you see Coulson and Loki, do you think there's a general sense of panic there? That's what I'm saying.
No, and the camera goes still, right?
That's what I'm saying. Right?
Yeah,
there's no listing.
That's what you're saying. There's no
we don't
listing.
have that scene with Loki, leaning back and forth to kind of handle the shifting of the ship.
Well, dang it, Andy! I never thought of it before now.
Yeah, I mean that's I think when you look at minute by minute, you're more likely to think of that when you're in the moment. It's not going to bother you. I mean, it's true. I mean, would we have gained anything if they were doing that? Would it have helped in any way, or if they contrived a way to explain it or to compartmentalize in some other way? I don't know.
That's what we're here for, and I'll tell you how it is, because that entire space is on a giant gimbal. And so it's auto leveling, Andy, and I just want to make sure that that's okay.
They're all on the gyroscope deck to.
That's right. It's the gyroscope deck.
Yeah.
More no prizes to give out.
Yep.
I think that it's fine. It is a cinematic tool for sure. It's something where if we're not seeing it because we're not in the bridge, then it's okay. We're not necessarily having to kind of continue that part of the story thread unless we get back to that particular place. Unless it's one of those things that's going to affect everybody. Like when we see an explosion go off and suddenly the entire ship shakes and then we cut in and we see somebody. But we're here in these scenes specifically to have these conversations. And so I think that they're designing it in a way where we're not meant to be thinking about these things at those points. And so, again, it is only the movie by minute format where you really are wondering, like, why is nobody reacting to the fact that this ship is falling out of the sky? Yeah. Until we get to the bridge. And that's where we are right now. So we see Nick Fury here looking at his screen. On his screen, we have a few things. IPX isopod containment status systems active, which is, of course, the pod where Thor just dropped from. So I don't know. Is that, when it says it's active, is that Fury's note that it has, in fact, been dropped?
Deployed?
Yeah. I don't know.
Or is it just the sensor that says the containment itself has not been breached? Whether or not it's in the ship doesn't matter. Is it still sealed?
It doesn't mean that the actual captive is active, does it? It's not sort of essentially, saying that the captive has not been killed by it. That would be an odd way to phrase it if it was.
That would be a very odd way to phrase it.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time gauging like what he's actually reading with that. Like, is it just that it's been deployed, that it has fallen out of the ship, that the door is locked? I mean, who knows? There are a million things that it could potentially mean. But I wish that I had a better sense, like, oh, Fury has now realized that somebody's been dropped out of the bottom of the ship. Like, I would imagine that he would want to know if somebody has done that.
Yeah.
We also hear over the intercom, all hands to crash stations immediately, which I suppose is the thing that happens on ships. But in a situation like this, I kept wondering, if they're on a giant flying ship like this, wouldn't it make more sense? I mean, Hydra certainly thought of it, to have a whole bunch of like drop ships so that everybody could run and hop on a drop ship and escape instead of just going to their crash stations.
That's actually what's really interesting. They have built a jail cell that they can eject out of the ship. But what about eject safety pods that they can eject?
Right. And I also wonder, is there any like civilian staff on this? Is it everyone here an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. who's working on it? Is there like a cafeteria staff? Is there,
exactly.
Yeah.
Who's working the commissary?
Yeah.
I'm Marge, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Oh, what do you do, Marge? I serve potatoes in the cafeteria.
I run the register.
But agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. I am. That's fantastic.
Evacuate all gift shop staff.
Right. We do have a sick bay. Maybe they're, somebody is there selling flowers in their little gift shop. It's very funny.
That's funny.
So, all right. So we get this sense that Fury is trying to figure out what to do at this particular point. And then we cut to, he is also on his screen. He's looking at what's going on with the engines. And that, of course, leads us to our cut, where we are back with Steve and trying to figure out what's going on with him and Tony as they work on fixing the engine. We're at this point where Steve is holding on to the wire or the cable, whatever it is that he's kind of clinging to. And I had a question because I'm trying to figure out the way that this shot plays, because as we see the ship, we come in on like the back of the ship, like we're under it and behind it, and we see the engines that are still lit. So I assume that they're still propelling it in some capacity. We come under the engine and we see Steve dangling, towed, directly back away from the engine, which is exactly the opposite way the engines are pushing. So if the engines are in fact working, Steve would be blown back into the area that he's working. Not to mention the fact that it's falling, so he should be getting blown back into the area that he is hanging from and up, as opposed to directly away from it. It's one of those things that, as I was watching this over and over, I'm like, wait a minute, it's like he is blowing, forward from the ship, and it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Heavy winds,
Also, right.
Hurricane force winds also
Yeah.
happen to be here. You just can't quite tell. It's, effects. It's the world of effects. They're trying to figure out a million things. It's one of those things where they're like, we want to see him blowing away from it. So it is what it is. We've got to make it look this way.
He has to be blowing away.
Yeah.
There's also, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm going to stick with heavy winds. I got nothing. It feels like he's and then I think in the next minute he's blows back the other way, and that feels like a utility move so that he can grab the grate and pull himself back up. So who knows?
It is what it is. We're not going to worry about it too much. So we do know, though, Engine 3 is the one that he and Tony are working on, and Engine 1 has been shut down by Clint's fancy little data arrow. And here we have, so basically the way the ship is designed, I'm not exactly sure how they numbered it, but basically Engine 1 and Engine 3 are cat-a-corner from each other. So I guess in the scope of a thing with 4 giant fans on the corners, if the ones opposite each other went out, I suppose, yes, it would probably start dropping. And I'm assuming this is why that they did it this way for story purposes. It's not going to just the whole thing like shift to the side and start falling vertically. I guess, I don't know. I guess
it'll
in my head,
spin on an axis.
yeah, but it will stay horizontal, right?
Right.
Here's hoping. I don't even know. This thing is so stupid.
Yeah. What's funny is we do see as we kind of pan past Steve and we move up and over the helicarrier, we see the Quinjet is fine. It's not budging at all. It's just sitting there. They must have been, I don't know. They locked it in
emergency
place. I'm not
brake.
sure.
Yeah.
It's the emergency brake. The air brake is probably
suction. They're actually suction cups.
We do see them. Helicarrier first takes off. We do see them like tying down just the planes and stuff, right? So but with cables. So that.
Right.
Must be some strong cables.
But some of the stuff doesn't obviously get tied down because as we come over, we actually see the helicopter. I'm assuming this is that one helicopter that conveniently also is the same one that Nick was flying earlier in the film that, of course, crashed. So this is the second version, I guess, of this helicopter. But it actually slips off of the upper deck and crashes down onto the deck below as we're kind of looking, as we kind of do this flyover. So not everything got tied down. That poor helicopter is gone. And I guess... I don't know. I guess that's pretty much it for the helicopter. And then we cut to Tony, and he's busy spinning around inside the turbine and doing his little thing. And
I love that. So much of the charm of Robert Downey Jr. As Tony is his knack for dialogue and his wit and so on. And so here, me joining you, the first Tony moment I get is him just going. Watching it just now, it made me think like, boy, do you think that he shot all of his inside the helmet scenes in one day? Because why not? I mean, maybe he might have needed some different makeup, So okay, Robert, in this scene, you're just pushing something really hard, so just grunt. They're like, okay,
okay,
you got it. Yeah.
Now list slightly to the left.
Yeah. It's probably one of those things where he comes back periodically to do another day because they're like, oh, you know what? We had you looking the wrong direction. We need you looking this direction. And it's, I'm sure with the visual effects department also with all the stuff they're putting on there, like, well, we need you your eye needs to be here because we kind of want you looking at this thing in front of your face. And so I would imagine that I'd like to think that it's just one day, but I imagine that Robert Downey Jr. ended up coming in a number of days to do these things. One
thing that bothered me sort of in the first batch of superhero movies from the early 21st century was, how often the characters would take off their masks. We were constantly seeing Tobey Maguire's face, and as a comics fan, it's like, the mask is a part of the look. And, but of course, it's like, an actor doesn't want to cover the face of the whole movie. They want people to see it's them. So huge ups to Pedro Pascal for wearing that mask, in almost every single scene of Mandalorian. And also the studio's like, hey, we paid $20 million for this actor. We're not, we want to put their face on screen as much as possible. So when they did confirm they're going to make an Avengers movie, I'm like, oh, good, maybe we'll see Iron Man in the costume more, because with other actors around, they won't feel the need to keep showing Robert Downey Jr.'s face as much. And then so this winds up being sort of the compromise that, like, we will see his face, but it'll be
we get a lot of in-helmet face.
And not to, complain too much about later films, but, we've certainly brought it up before, where once you get to the nanotech, it becomes very easy for them to write the actors in and out of their costumes as needed, right? It's just like, now you push a button and all of this stuff forms around your face now that you're done talking, and it's a little much. I definitely prefer, like, Dread is always a great example that I go to, because just the way that played was so great. Carl Urban, kudos for never taking that thing off.
Yeah, Carl Urban willing to do it. The exact opposite of Stallone, who barely ever had it on, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
The last little note I have for this minute is the altimeter. First, we see with Fury, his starts around 18,000 and continues dropping, gets to about 17,800. By the time we cut to Tony and we see in his HUD that we are down around 13,000. So this thing, it seems like that was just seconds, but I can't imagine it's actually just fell 5,000 feet in the span of those seconds. Otherwise, they're going to hit the Earth very quickly before we get this thing fixed.
You think Cap has a dangling problem? If he's falling at that rate, he's not dangling side to side. He's like being thrown up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very good point.
But again, going to another complaint that we had, if in fact the helicarrier is at this point, as it's falling, it's just getting to 18,000 feet. That means there's no way that Clint and his mercenary team could have landed on the helicarrier and walked across it. They would have not been able to breathe, and they would have been blown off immediately.
Yes.
Oh well.
We stand by that. It's ridiculous.
Yes, we do. All right. Well, that is it for minute 87. Fantastic bit of conversations with you this week, Dean. We'll have you back in a few weeks to talk about minutes 97 and 98. But for now, tell everybody again one last time this week about your plays and where they can track them down.
Absolutely, yeah. So I write plays that are mostly done by like high school and middle school drama clubs. They are mostly parodies of pop culture things, including my play Marvelous Squad, which is a parody of mostly the first Avengers movies, but a bunch of other MCU stuff. I have another superhero play that is also out there and available for production. It's called. I wrote it in like about this time, about April of 2020, and it's called Superheroes Under Quarantine. And it's actually I would consider it a pastiche rather than a parody, because the characters I'm not really sort of mocking them. I'm just kind of doing them, maybe slightly broader, slightly more comic. But yeah, it's the first act is basically there's a global pandemic in the DC universe, and the heroes have to only talk to each other via Skype or Zoom to work on a case, and it goes from one to another. It's all a series of two character scenes, sort of game of telephone. And then by the end of the first act, it jumps to the Marvel universe. The characters all have names like Red Caped Hero and Nighttime Hero and Patriotic Hero and so on. Yeah, none of the names are ever spoken aloud. They just get
sure.
So covering myself from any legal action, I think. So that one is lots of fun, and I like to think, and that one I really try to write the characters like the movie version, certainly for the Marvel characters, and that was really cool to get to try to do the Robert Downey sort of rhythms and patois and Tom Holland and Benedict Cumberbatch. You get those voices in my head. That was a fun exercise to do. And people don't really want to do plays about quarantines and pandemics anymore. It seems maybe we'll hit that wave of nostalgia for 2020 at some point, and that play will start getting produced a lot more. I hope, because it is pretty fun. And I would just say that in Marvelous Squad, My version of the helicarrier is called the holicarrier because it was named by an agent's daughter on Take Your Daughter to Work Day. Yeah, let's see. Any other? Yeah, that's the only one I'll drop for now.
Awesome. I love the whole act of writing plays for a year and a half of time. Like this is funny right now, kids.
Yeah. we didn't know how long it was going to last.
Of course.
Because that was the first thing got shut down. I was all set to take my kids to see a high school production of The Music Man that got canceled, for one of the first COVID shutdowns in our neighborhood. And so suddenly every playwright was scrambling to write plays you could perform on Zoom.
Yeah.
So I wrote Superheroes Under Quarantine. I also wrote Greek Gods Under Quarantine. And I wrote another one that it's a heist comedy, but it's done with like a choose your own adventure type thing. So the audience would vote on, so you'd use like the vote feature on Zoom. It was an interesting challenge. And I like the things that I turned out. And I'm not sad that the pandemic is sort of over, but I'm a little sad that those ones aren't getting done as often as they were for a short spurt there.
Wow, it's still quite fun. So
funny.
Well, check that out. We'll have the links in the show notes for that and all the other places you can find Dean. So check that out in the show notes, everybody. If you're not seeing them in your podcatcher, just go to our website, marvelmovieminute.com, and you can find everything there. You can also learn about our membership where you can get early access to shows, ad-free shows, all that good stuff. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with another guest to talk about Minute 88. So, Pete, thanks as always.
You know what, Andy? Who cares? I don't think they're ever going to fix this stupid ship. I think it's done.
It's on its way down. 5,000 feet in 10 seconds. Yeah. It's crashing soon. Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.